This is Bitnar Talks, the engineer takes on construction. Episode 14. Hi, I'm Piotr Bitnar. Each day I help my clients plan and design building projects through Bitnar Limited, a consulting chartered structural engineer's practice. My biggest passion and the cornerstone on which I've built my business is finding clever solutions for construction projects. I am a chartered structural engineer and a budding software developer, so you can rest assured that I will strive to talk about the best practices and the use of new technologies in the industry. And if you're embarking on a construction project or are involved in planning, designing and building the world around us, you'll find this podcast useful. Approved Document B, Fire Safety, Part 1. Hi there, and welcome back to Bitnar Talks, your favorite podcast on all matters of architecture, engineering and construction. It is Thursday the 2nd of May 2024, and I'm here back with you with the 14th episode and further information on approved documents. Another busy week is gone, and the whiff of the weekend makes us all look forward to tomorrow. Last week, in episode 13, I finished talking about the building regulations requirement A, structures, committing the entire episode to aspect of disproportionate collapse. I've told you about different classes of buildings from class 1 to 3 and sui generis, what these are and how to approach them from the perspective of robustness to avoid disproportionate collapse. Now, we move into the interesting world of fire safety in and around buildings, and this will take the next several episodes. The approved document divides its attention to dwellings and buildings other than dwellings. I think, taking the scope of the documents, there will be several episodes on the dwelling side of things and similarly on non-dwellings. I will enhance the commentary on the approved document with some insight from BS 9999, which is the standard code of practice that deals with fire safety in the design, management and use of buildings. Alright, let us have a closer look at the subject. So without further ado, let's dive into the fire safety requirements as treated in the approved document. Right after the consideration of structure comes the consideration of fire. Sure things there is no need to consider fire if the building won't stand, but fire can also be one of the major contributors to building failure and collapse, not to mention loss of life. Fire considerations spread far and wide over the other parts of the legislation too, and should be treated as a part of the holistic building design process and consideration. In this episode, I will discuss the consideration that the Secretary of State draws our attention to. I will go section by section, giving you simple reasons behind the text and, where appropriate, my commentary. This episode will cover section 0 and section 1. However, the approved document consists of 18 sections and 7 appendices discharging requirements with glorious titles of B1 to B5, with additional mention of Regulation 6, Paragraph 3, and 7, Paragraph 2, and obviously the Regulation 38. Are you lost already? Good. Let us unpack it a little bit, shall we? Alright, so let's get on to it. This episode talks about Volume 1 of the Approved Documents B, Fire Safety, dealing with dwellings only. The Approved Document 1 follows the requirements B1 to B5 of the building regulations, which simply require a provision of sufficient alarm, means of escape, inhibition of fire spread internally, externally, between the buildings or in hidden spaces and cavities, assuring the building will remain structurally sound for the required time, and sufficient provision for firefighting is also available. It also mentions Regulation 38, which requires the provision of fire safety information to the responsible party that manages the relevant building. In a gist, all but single-family dwellings and single units in blocks of flats are the relevant buildings. It needs to be understood that all these aspects, although dealt with in isolation, form an interconnected approach to the fire safety of dwellings and need to be approached iteratively and holistically. Further clarification is contained within appendices where specific information can be found in one place, and the document references the Fire Protection Association as a go-to institution for upgrading the fire safety to levels beyond that of the minimum requirement described in the approved document. The document mentions that it is also not intended to exclude people for any reasons from the use of the building, except in the extreme circumstances. It should also be considered that the guidance can be met in other ways, but only such alternative will be fine if they don't increase the risk level of the solution that is otherwise accepted by the document, and that the guidance is general for typical use scenarios. Some additional consideration may be needed, like, for example, provisions for fire safety of sheltered housing, for example, where occupants may not be capable of using the building with the same fluency general public does. Fire safety engineering is considered as a good approach, as a good alternative to the approved document, to the approved guidance of the approved document. British Standard 7974, application of fire safety engineering principles to the design of buildings, is one of such guidance documents that could prove useful in finding the alternative approach to approved document ways of doing things. Approved documents guidance follows the identification of the level of hazards of the particular building by assigning purpose group relevant to the use of that particular building. As we all know, compartments and buildings can vary in their use and be mixed. So the general consideration in such circumstance, and if the use is ancillary to the main designation, is to use approach of the higher group. But some concession can be made if the part is sufficiently big to be treated on its own. When it comes to separated compartments, each compartment should be treated on their own merits. So what is the classification here? As we talk about dwellings, I will consider this group here only, which falls under Volume 1 of Approved Document B. And they basically fall under the consideration of the purpose group Volume 1, dwellings, as I say. So flats, dwelling houses with floors at the level not higher than 4.5 meters above the ground level, 2 floors at the height of maximum level 18 meter up there in the sky, and houses with floors level underneath this provision. We are generally talking about housing provision and building uses that can be ancillary to it, like a small garage or home office, perhaps surgery even. If provisions fall outside of this purpose group, some further requirements that are dealt with in Volume 2 may need to be considered, like in case of mixed-use buildings. Okay, so let's talk about these simple housing conditions for buildings in Volume 1, shall we? So what we talk about here is decreasing risk as we go down the group designation. So the highest one would be flats, which fall under Group 1A. Then we go in higher risk houses, which are Group 1B. And then typical houses, which fall under the consideration of Group 1C. Now, let's consider the requirement B1, means of warning and escape. The regulations say the building shall be designed and constructed so that there are appropriate provisions for the early warning of fire and appropriate means of escape in case of fire from the building to a place of safety outside the building, capable of being safely and effectively used at all material times. And what does the Secretary of State has to say about this? For the Secretary of State, it means that there is sufficient early warning system in place that all people can escape unaided. There is sufficient provision of escape routes, sufficient in location, number, and capacity. Escape routes are sufficiently protected from the effect of fire and smoke. Escape routes are sufficiently lit and signed. Escape routes are either not overly impacted by smoke, or the smoke is being removed and fire spread is restricted. For floods, sufficient provision is made for stapled evacuation strategy. Starting with the Section 1, Fire Detection and Alarm Systems. As a minimum, all dwellings should have grade D2 category LD3 alarm systems in place. What this means is grading to D2 according to BS 5839. The alarm system is mains connected with battery backup in each sensor at escape routes only. Escape routes only considerations are covered underneath the LD3 designation. LD3 meaning we always recommend LD2 approach as a minimum, placing additional sensors in higher risk rooms like kitchen or living room, but preferably houses should be equipped using LD1 approach with additional sensors in places where the fire is likely to originate, like the garage or meter carpet. Note that if the dwelling is large, which means it's got 200 meters square of a story, and it's at least 2-story, not considering basement, the minimum alarm should be grade A, category LD2. Now, grade A means separate detectors, alarms, and central control unit and indicators with backup power supply, according to BSEN 54. When you do an extension, fire alarm system should be installed when you add a habitable room over or below ground story, and if it is provided at the ground story also, when there is no final exit from that room. In any way, when you propose an extension to the existing house, smoke alarms should be provided in circulation areas. Similar expectations of the provision of minimum detection and alarm system is prescribed to flats treated as separate compartments so that they do not need communal alarm system. The document also recognizes student accommodation as a unique entity, but such units, if they hold no more than 6 people and are generally considered as compartmentalized flats. Similar due consideration to flats should be given. However, if the building has a total evacuation strategy in place, this building will fall under the consideration of Volume 2 for the provision of fire detection and alarm. In special situations where people can and need to be aided by assistance, flats alarm system should be connected to the monitoring point, informing the responsible person about the fire and its location. Here, I mean sheltered housing flats that fall under Volume 1 consideration. The document goes to state the obvious that all the systems need to be coordinated, well installed and maintained to assure their appropriate operation. So here you have it, approved document B, introduction and section 0 and 1 under the belt. I delved a little bit into the essential aspects of fire safety regulations for residential buildings, particularly focusing on dwellings. I trust you have gained some appreciation of the key requirements outlined in Volume 1 of the approved documents B Fire Safety, which spans provisions from early fire detection to effective means of escape. The document emphasizes the interconnected nature of fire safety measures, highlights the need for a holistic approach that addresses early detection and alarms, escape routes, fire spread inhibition, structural integrity, and firefighting provisions. It is crucial to appreciate Regulation 38, which necessitates the provision of fire safety information to responsible parties managing relevant buildings. We can have the best system in place, but if we do not know how to use it and maintain it, I doubt it will be of much use. The fire safety approach breeds inclusivity. Fire safety measures should not exclude individuals unless under extreme circumstances. I think the most important part of approaching fire safety considerations is to do it iteratively when doing fire safety planning. These measures should be approached holistically and adapted as needed to suit specific context and evolving needs. Mind you that the fire safety engineering is a viable alternative approach with the use of British Standard 7974 and other published documents as a valuable resource for designing buildings with optimal fire safety measures. In any case, we approach the consideration assigning buildings to the different risk category, delineating specific requirements for each category and specifying appropriate solution to given building. In the next episode, I will cover Section 2 and 3, means of escape from dwelling houses and flats, and Section 4, addressing the requirement B2, internal fire spread linings. I hope you enjoyed this episode and that the consideration of fire safety in buildings begins to make more sense to you. If you have any questions, reach out to me on LinkedIn or send me an email. I'm more than happy to help you out. In Bytna, we deal with planning, designing and managing of your projects, and we are always glad to facilitate a free initial consultation to steer you in the right direction. Visit www.bytna.co.uk and reach out to us. Whether your question is if we can help you with your project or what should I do, we will be able to give you a piece of non-obligatory advice and steer you in the right direction. At Bytna, we help our clients design and execute their dream homes or investments. If your building is falling apart, we can also help investigate the reasons behind it and to provide you with an appropriate strategy, design and specifications for the repair. Thank you again for listening. Please voice up your opinions. I'm waiting for you on LinkedIn and I want to hear from you. Toodaloo!